I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning, standing in the break room, holding the same coffee cup that had been my favorite habit just the night before, now suddenly turned against me. I smiled quietly to myself, not knowing that same smile would be used against me later. Just 3 weeks after that, I was standing in that same break room, but this time it was not coffee in my hands, it was a cardboard box. My name was taped on the side of it, like I was something being returned. My photo frame was lying face down inside. And the badge that had been my identity just the day before no longer recognized this door at all. My name is Rachel Doyle, and for 3 years I was the kind of employee managers point to during onboarding. Exceeds expectations, my last review said, 4 times in a row. I sat at a corner desk in an open floor plan office in Columbus, Ohio, surrounded by the low hum of keyboards and the smell of burnt coffee from the shared kitchen. Every Monday at 9, we had an all-hands meeting where my director, Mark Feld, would read out numbers on a projector screen, and my name showed up near the top more often than not. I ran the Midwest accounts team. 4 people reported to me. I trained 2 of them myself. When a client threatened to walk in my second year, I was the one who flew to Cincinnati on a Friday night to fix it, and Mark told the whole room about it the following Monday. That was who I was there. Reliable. Sharp. The one who didn't need to be managed. I found out I was 9 weeks along on a Sunday, and by Tuesday I had already rehearsed what I'd say. I told Mark first, in his office, door half open because that was the culture, nothing behind closed doors unless it was bad news. He smiled, said congratulations, asked when I was due. March, I said. He nodded and wrote something on a sticky note. That Thursday, during the all-hands, I told the team myself. A few people clapped. One coworker, Denise, hugged me and said she was thrilled, she'd been trying for 2 years herself. Mark stood near the back of the room, arms crossed, not clapping, just watching. I didn't think much of it. Not yet. I had no reason to. I went back to my desk that afternoon feeling like nothing had changed. I was wrong about that. Something already had. The first thing I noticed was the calendar invite that didn't come. Every Wednesday for 2 years, Mark had looped me into the regional strategy call, the one where budget decisions got made before anyone else heard about them. That Wednesday, my calendar sat empty at 10 a.m. I figured it was a scheduling glitch. I messaged him on Slack. Hey, did the strategy call move? He responded 20 minutes later. We trimmed the invite list this week, nothing personal. I stared at that message for a while, then closed the laptop and went to get coffee like it was nothing. By the following week, I noticed the Midwest Accounts channel on Slack had gone quiet in a specific way. Not quiet like a slow day. Quiet like a conversation had moved somewhere I wasn't. I asked Denise about a client renewal that was supposed to close that month. She looked at her screen a beat too long before answering. I think that got reassigned, she said. To who? She shrugged and said she'd have to check, then didn't bring it up again for the rest of the day. I brought it to Mark directly. I sat down across from his desk and asked him straight out if something had changed with my role. He leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers together, and said, "We're just going through some restructuring conversations, nothing to worry about." I asked if it involved my account specifically. He said, "Let's not get ahead of things," and looked back at his monitor, which was his way of ending a conversation without ending it. I told my husband that night I couldn't tell if I was imagining it. He asked if maybe it was just pregnancy brain making me paranoid. I laughed it off because it was easier than admitting how much that comment stung, and because some small part of me wanted to believe he was right. 3 weeks after I announced, I got an email requesting a meeting with Mark and someone from HR named Todd Ruiz. No agenda in the invite, just a time and a room number. I remember walking in and seeing a printed folder already sitting on the table, my name typed across the top tab. Todd slid it toward me and said this was a performance improvement plan, standard procedure, nothing to be alarmed about. I asked what performance issues had come up, since my last review, 4 months earlier, had rated me as exceeding expectations across every category. Todd said priorities shift, and pointed to a line item about missed deadlines on the Cincinnati account, the same account I had personally saved the year before. I told him that account was thriving, I had the numbers to prove it. Mark said, "We're looking at the full picture, not just individual wins." I asked, point blank, if this had anything to do with my pregnancy. There was a pause just long enough to mean something. Then Mark said, "We just don't think this role is sustainable for your situation going forward." Nobody in that room used the word pregnant. Nobody needed to. I signed nothing that day. I asked for a copy of the plan and said I needed time to review it, which Todd said was fine, though the tightness in his jaw told me it wasn't the response he expected. I walked back to my desk holding that folder against my chest like it might slip out of my hands if I loosened my grip even slightly. The office had a way of getting quiet around me after that. I'd catch two coworkers stop talking mid-sentence when I walked past the break room. Denise started taking her lunch at her desk instead of with me, always with some reason, a deadline, a headache, a call she needed to make. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself that 4 separate times in 1 week, which is usually the moment you stop believing yourself. I started writing things down. Dates, times, exact wording, who said what and where. I didn't fully know why yet, only that some instinct older than logic told me I would need it later. I saved the PIP documents to a personal email account that night, the same night I found the first thread that made my stomach drop, a Slack message thread I wasn't supposed to see, forwarded to me by accident by a coworker who hadn't checked the recipient list closely enough. I opened it expecting nothing. Instead I found 5 lines of conversation between Mark and someone in leadership, timestamped the same afternoon I had announced my pregnancy in that all-hands meeting. I read the first line twice before I understood what I was looking at. I didn't say anything to anyone that night. I just sat at my kitchen table with my laptop screen glowing in an otherwise dark room, reading those 5 lines over and over, and thinking about how long this had actually been planned before I ever walked into that meeting with the folder and my name on the tab. The email came in at 8:15 the next morning, before I'd even taken my coat off. Meeting request, 10 a.m., same conference room, Todd Ruiz and Mark Feld again. No agenda line this time either. I sat at my desk for the next hour and a half answering emails I don't remember writing, my eyes drifting to the clock every few minutes like it might change what was coming. At 10, I walked into the room and saw a banker's box sitting on the chair beside Todd, already half filled with the framed photo from my desk turned face down inside it. That was the first thing that told me everything before anyone said a word. Todd slid a folder across the table, thicker than the one before. "Rachel," he said, "we've made the decision to eliminate your position as part of a broader restructuring." I asked which positions were being eliminated alongside mine. He said he wasn't able to discuss other personnel matters. I asked if this was related to the PIP from 3 weeks earlier. Mark answered that one himself. "This is a business decision, not a performance issue," he said, which was somehow worse than if he'd just lied to my face about my numbers again. Todd pushed a second document toward me, a severance agreement, 60 days of pay, contingent on my signature on the page beneath it, a non-disclosure agreement that would keep me from discussing the terms of my departure or the circumstances surrounding it. He said I had 5 business days to review it with an attorney if I wanted one. I asked why I would need an attorney for a routine restructuring. Nobody answered that. I asked for time before signing anything. Todd said that was fine, and then, almost as an afterthought, mentioned my badge would be deactivated effective immediately, standard procedure for departing employees. I hadn't even left the building yet and I was already locked out of it. I carried that box past the same desks where I'd trained 2 of my own team members, past the kitchen where Denise had once hugged me and said she was thrilled for me. Nobody looked up. Not because they didn't care, I understood later, but because they didn't know what to say to a woman being walked out 7 months pregnant, holding a cardboard box with her own name still taped to the side of it. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time before I turned the key. I thought about the 5 lines on that Slack thread still sitting unopened in my personal email, and I thought, not yet, but soon. The message I got that night did not come from a name I recognized right away. It came from a LinkedIn account under Amanda Cole, someone I had worked with 4 years earlier when she ran a small team in operations, before she left the company without much explanation. The message just said, "I heard what happened. Call me when you can, this isn't public yet." I stared at that for a long time before I answered. Part of me wondered if it was a trap, someone fishing for information to report back to Mark. But something about the wording, "this isn't public yet," sat wrong in a way that felt less like gossip and more like warning. I called her the next evening from my car again, parked 2 blocks from my house so my husband would not hear. She picked up on the second ring and did not waste time on small talk. She asked if they had used the word restructuring. I said yes. She asked if there had been a performance improvement plan with no prior warning. I said yes to that too. She went quiet for a second, then said, "They did the same thing to me in 2019. I asked what she meant. She said she had been 6 months pregnant, rated as a strong performer every year before that, and within a month of announcing she was suddenly failing to meet expectations nobody had mentioned before. She said she signed the severance agreement because she was scared and because the NDA made it sound like fighting it would cost her more than staying quiet ever would." I asked her why she was telling me this now, since she clearly had not told anyone for years. She was quiet again, longer this time. Then she said, "Because I work in HR now, at the same company, and I just approved the paperwork for the 4th woman this has happened to since I got hired." That number landed harder than anything Mark or Todd had said to me in that conference room. Not one story. Not a coincidence. A pattern with a head count. I asked her directly if she could give me anything in writing. She hesitated, and I could hear how much that question cost her, someone who had already lost a job once for being inconvenient at the wrong time. She said she could not officially hand me anything, that would end her career and probably worse. But she said there were internal emails referencing performance concerns that were dated before any actual performance issue had been documented, and she was not the only person inside the company who had noticed. She told me to check my personal email in the morning. She said she was not sending anything herself, not directly, and that I should not ask her how anything arrived. I did not push. I understood, in the way you understand things you are not supposed to say out loud, that she was drawing a line between helping me and protecting herself, and that line mattered to her survival as much as mine. Before we hung up, she said one more thing. She said, "Whatever you do with this, do it carefully, because they have done this enough times to know how to make it disappear. I am still learning how to make sure it does not." I did not sleep that night. I kept thinking about the 5 lines still sitting in that Slack thread, and now a 4th name added to a list I had not even seen yet. In the morning, before my coffee had finished brewing, I opened my personal email and found a message from an address I did not recognize, no subject line, just a single attachment waiting to be opened. The attachment opened as a folder of forwarded messages, stripped of any name that could trace back to Amanda, just raw text pasted into a document. I recognized Mark's writing style immediately, the same clipped sentences he used in every email. One line near the top stopped me cold, dated 3 days before my announcement even went to the team, an internal note asking whether my role was, in his words, still necessary given upcoming changes. Upcoming changes I had never been told about. I sat with my coffee going cold and read it 4 times before I called anyone. Then I called a lawyer, a name I found through a friend of a friend who specialized in employment cases, someone named Carla Whitfield. I told her everything, the PIP, the firing, the Slack thread, the folder with the timestamps that did not add up. She asked me one question before anything else. She asked, "Do you have this in writing anywhere, not just what someone told you?" I said yes, and I heard her exhale on the other end of the line like she had been waiting a long time to hear that answer from someone. Carla walked me through filing a charge with the EEOC, explaining that before I could take anything to court, the claim had to go through that process first. She said it plainly, without sugarcoating how long it might take. Weeks turned into months. I kept working my part-time job at the pharmacy counter to cover what the severance did not, checking my email every night for a letter I was told to expect eventually, called a right to sue notice. When it finally came, I remember standing in my kitchen holding the envelope for a long moment before opening it, the same kitchen table where I had first read those 5 lines on my laptop. Carla filed the lawsuit within the week. The deposition process was where everything changed. Mark sat across the table from Carla, a court reporter typing every word, and when she asked him directly why my performance rating dropped so sharply within 1 month with no prior documentation, he said, "We felt there were concerns building for a while." Carla slid a printed page across the table, the internal email dated before my announcement. She asked him to explain the date. He did not have an answer that held together. Then came the discovery documents, boxes of internal records the company was legally required to hand over. Carla called me one evening, her voice different than I had heard it before, almost careful. She said, "I need you to sit down for this." She told me they had found 4 other cases, going back 6 years, for other women, each one following nearly the same pattern: a strong review, a pregnancy announcement, a sudden PIP, then termination within weeks. Not one of them had gone public. Every one of them had signed something similar to what I almost signed. I asked her what that meant for my case. She said it meant this was no longer just about me. She said the word that made my chest tighten in a way I had not expected: class action. I sat with the phone against my ear for a long time after we hung up, thinking about how many kitchen tables like mine there must have been, how many women had sat exactly where I was sitting, believing they were alone in it. Carla called 2 weeks later with news that changed the shape of everything. She said the company's insurer was pushing for a private settlement, fast and quiet, before any of this reached a courtroom. I asked why that mattered. She said it meant they were scared, and scared companies move quickly to keep things out of public record. But she also said something else, that the plaintiffs, now 5 of us, had a decision to make. Take a quiet settlement with an NDA attached, or push for the case to be certified as a class action, which would mean court filings became public documents, open for anyone to read. I sat with that question longer than I sat with almost anything else in the whole process. Signing quietly would have solved my immediate problems. My husband asked me directly one night at the kitchen table, "Are you sure you want to do this the hard way?" I told him I didn't know if it was about being sure. I said, "Somebody already tried to disappear quietly once, and I found out where that got her." We chose to push forward. 2 months later, the court certified the class action. And 3 weeks after that, the story broke, not because I gave it to anyone, but because court filings are public, and a business reporter covering employment law had been watching the docket. The company scheduled an emergency all-hands meeting the following Monday, streamed to every office and every remote employee through the same platform they used for ordinary quarterly updates. I was not in that meeting. I was not an employee anymore. But 2 people who still worked there sent me pieces of it afterward, screenshots and a recording someone had not been supposed to make. In the recording, the CEO stood at a podium in front of a slide deck clearly assembled overnight, trying to frame the lawsuit as an isolated misunderstanding. He used the phrase, "We take these allegations seriously," twice in the first 2 minutes. Then someone in the room, an employee whose name I never learned, asked a question that was not on the approved list. She asked if it was true that 4 other women had filed similar complaints before me. The room went silent in the recording, the kind of silence you can hear even through a phone speaker. The CEO said he could not comment on ongoing litigation. But by then, the discovery documents were already part of the court record, and reporters covering the case had access to the same internal emails Carla had shown me across that deposition table months earlier, including the one dated 3 days before my announcement. Within a week, the story had a name attached to it in the press, not mine specifically, but the company's, tied to a pattern going back 6 years and 5 separate cases. Shareholders started asking questions the board could not answer quietly. A statement went out promising an internal review. Nobody used the phrase class action in that statement, but everyone reading it understood exactly what it meant. I remember watching a clip of that shareholder call from my kitchen, the same table again, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold because I forgot it was there. I thought about the folder with my name on the tab, the badge that stopped working, the box I carried past people who wouldn't look at me. I thought about how none of that had been about one bad review or one difficult employee. It had been a system, tested and repeated, until someone finally refused to sign quietly. Carla called that same evening. She said the company's legal team had reached out asking to restart settlement talks, this time without the option of silence attached to it. She asked if I was ready for what came next. I told her I had been ready since the day I opened that folder with my name on it. What I did not yet know was how much more there still was to find out about who else, inside that same building, had known and said nothing until now. The settlement talks moved faster than anything else in the entire case, which Carla said was normal once a company stopped worrying about the lawsuit and started worrying about the headlines attached to it. Within 6 weeks, all 5 of us had agreements on the table, real numbers this time, not the 60 days of severance I had almost signed away for silence. Carla called to walk me through the terms and said one line I will not forget. She said, "This time you get to talk about it if you ever want to." The company released a public statement the same week the settlements were finalized. It used careful language, phrases like deeply regrets and are implementing new policies, but it also included something none of us expected, a direct acknowledgement that multiple employees had been separated from the company following pregnancy announcements under circumstances that did not meet its own standards. Reading that sentence on my phone, standing in my kitchen again, felt different than I expected. Not triumphant exactly. More like something finally being said out loud after months of only being true in private. The fallout did not stop with one statement. 2 board members resigned within the month. A major client publicly paused a contract pending review. Employee review sites filled with comments from current and former staff describing the same open floor office, the same all-hands meetings, the same quiet reshuffling I had lived through myself. Mark's name came up more than once in those posts, though never in a way I had orchestrated or asked for. I used part of the settlement to do something I had thought about since the night I first read those 5 lines on my laptop. I started a small consulting practice helping women understand their rights when pregnancy discrimination showed up at work, how to document things early, when to involve the EEOC, what an NDA actually means before signing it. My first client found me through Amanda, who reached out one more time, this time using her real name openly, no longer hiding behind a message with no return address. I rented a small office above a dental practice, nothing fancy, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a window that caught the morning light. On my first full day there, I made a cup of coffee in a mug I bought specifically for that room, and stood by the window holding it, watching the parking lot below fill up with cars belonging to people who worked for someone else, the way I once had. My phone buzzed on the desk behind me. It was Amanda, asking if I had a few minutes to talk to a woman she knew, 6 months along, whose manager had just stopped inviting her to meetings the week before. I told Amanda to have her call me that afternoon. Then I sat back down at my desk, coffee still warm, and thought about how many women were sitting in a car right now, or a kitchen, wondering if what was happening to them even had a name. If you have ever been punished for something you could not control, I hope you know, you were never the problem. They were.